Hey everyone, welcome to the Lake Michigan Angler Podcast. Today we are here with Kyle Devers of Big Boy Fishing.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Welcome to season 3 of the LMA podcast. And surprise, we're starting it earlier than we ever have before. And just a lot of the feedback from the last couple of seasons, everyone was like, want to hear more of these podcasts. He had a lot of great guests and all that stuff. So here we are. And what's cool about this, two things. One, we finally got you here because you're hard to pin down, and rightfully so. I mean, just one look at your social media, you're a fishing machine.
Yeah, I try and fish every day. Even if I don't have trips, I'm fishing.
So why? You know, at some point, even for me, you get periods where like I just need a little bit of a break. You know, just a little, maybe a week off, just to reset and all that. How do you manage to go through and fish every day?
Like if you're booked with me, say I go a week on and then you're in a groove, you know, you're constantly fishing. Then I have a couple of days off, but say like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you got customers again. I just like to stay in that groove to kind of, you just got to stay on the fish. It can be tough, but trust me, I'm ready for deer hunting.
Well, most folks right now, it's October as we're sitting here recording this right now, and this tends to be the time of the year where it's a big transition for the outdoorsman, right? You're going from fishing, guys are already now starting to hunt a little bit.
Yeah.
And some guys are doing like a 50-50 split. They'll dabble with some fishing, they'll go out and do some hunting. Some fully convert and some stay and fish and all this stuff. So what we wanted to do today, because you have such a unique perspective in that you run a big charter boat.
Yep.
You fish from shore.
Yep.
You fish from small boats.
Yep.
You cover all of these areas and all that. And so we wanted to pick your brain in today's episode and cover fishing fall and winter here on Lake Michigan. Sometimes people forget that there's still wonderful opportunities to catch salmon and trout. And it becomes so much more accessible.
Yep.
You know, and so let's start there. Here we are in October. You know, most guys focus on the Kings and the King run.
Yep.
And that's usually like mid-August through all of September.
Yeah.
Once you get in October, people's minds start to shift a bit. What are we looking for right now? What can guys get into right at this moment for the rest of the month of October?
Well, there still is some lingering king salmon, but you know they're half gone. But right now we're really just waiting on a good push of coho salmon. They processed almost 1,000 as yesterday, but it should only get better as we go on through the month into November. We'll still catch kings, honestly, till probably that first week of November, but doing it in the river more. As we got a lot of rain this week, a lot of our fish went upriver. But yeah, a lot of guys will be hunting, so there won't be as much foot traffic on the river, but there's still a lot of fish to be had in the river.
When we're talking about these fish, you said 1,000 went up. Do you think those are some of the early coho we're talking about?
Yeah, I fish a lot in the Rud. Everyone knows. They processed 1,000 fish, 1,000 cohos, I should say, out of the weir. So that's a good start, and it's still early. November it should even get better for cohos, but we still got a lot of time and a lot of fish are still in the river right now.
What's when you say 1,000 in terms of numbers, is that below number, low number, high number? For context,
I mean, I would say it's decent. I mean,
Yeah, for this early, it's a decent number.
Okay.
It'll definitely get a lot higher than that as more cohos come in because it's still a little early for cohos.
Yeah, I mean, last year, a lot of people know, like, the coho run was insane. I don't know if I've ever seen it that. I mean, we kind of got spoiled where your standard coho was like 10 to 12 pounds.
Yeah, it was.
This year, it seems like they're a little bit smaller, but I still think, we're going to get a good return, but it's going to be hard to beat last year. I mean, last year was probably the best I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's still some out in the lake. I know some guys are still casting on the pier, catching them, but it's about go time for them. So
yeah, I was out there. I actually went out today. I was out of Kenosha just you want to see what's going on there. And I knew the water would be a little messed up, but it's still pretty blown out.
Yeah.
It's really nasty out there. But there was a lot of activity in the first 7 feet of the water column.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm thinking some of these fish are starting to straggle around in the area and stuff like that. So it is a good sign. And like you mentioned, last year was the year of the coho. I mean, it was just insane. From the beginning of spring all the way through the fall run, there were just monster coho.
Yeah, I had customers like rebook the same dates that they had from last year to this year, and
how did that go when they pulled in the regular guys?
It's just like we're not catching coho. I said, well, the thing is every year is different. You know, it's just our king run was strong. You know, it was strong though last year, but the cohos last year. I don't know if we'll ever see it like that. I've never been in the river. It was pretty low, where 100 would swim past you.
Yes.
Like I've never seen that.
Yeah.
You know.
I saw that. Yep.
You know, they keep stocking fish. You know, like they've been. We'll keep getting good returns.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for. So, as guys are thinking about preparing to take advantage of these fall cohos, what changes? Most guys and most folks are familiar with how to target kings, you know, the kind of crankbaits and the kind of spoons. Coho can be a little bit different. They can be way more pickier. What are we looking at in as far as selection of lures that someone can kind of start with and focus on?
So I love MEP spinners, especially for new anglers that, you know, they're just getting into it. You can't mess up a MEPS. I mean, you swing it in front of their face. Cohos are very aggressive to a certain point, or, you know, a jig, a small hair jig. I've seen a lot of guys last year, they were just casting a hair jig in a hole and just popping it and catching cohos. I never did it like that. I would always do it on a bobber. Mm-hmm. But, you know, like a bobber with a hair jig, or just a straight hair jig, or a bobber with, you know, say a tube jig. You know, there's always different ways to do it, but my favorite way, I hate to say, is casting MEPS at them. It's probably one of my favorite. You'll have a couple chase it at a time. It's one of my favorite ways to catch them.
Which size spinners are you using?
I use a lot of size 3.
Okay.
A lot of size 3 MEPS, like a gold. You know, some days they want the silver blade, but last year was like a lot of gold and red, or they make an orange blade.
Yeah.
One was really good too.
Like the Aglias?
Yep.
With hair or no hair?
No hair.
Okay.
I like with the no hair.
Those are like the fine details, right? Because had Rob not followed up and asked that, people would assume the hair.
Well, because MEPS makes like a billion different spinners.
You almost forget how many they make.
It's incredible.
So I won't say that the hair doesn't work, but I've noticed like sometimes like the cohos, they'll chase it and mouth it. Mm-hmm. With the hair, I've noticed like customers or I will lose more fish. Or like they come up head shaking. If you don't get a good hook set, you know, you're going to lose that fish. So then I just went no hair, and then I started catching more. So then, you know, as a fisherman, you're kind of superstitious. Now I can't go back.
Yeah, you mentioned that before we started recording. Like, you're very superstitious. In what way? Is it like you're very particular about what you use and how you use it? Is it you wear the same pants when you go fishing? Yeah. Like, to what level of superstition do you
I'm
have
still
here?
driving the same car from 8 years ago. You know, like you get just kind of like tunnel vision. You know, like I do the same thing, make sure all my leaders are good. You know, rod and reels are good. You just kind of get stuck in your ways. I want to do the same thing every day if it's producing. You know, just little details. You know, but it'll get you if you pay attention to stuff. It'll help you as you go on. But I am superstitious. You know, I use the same Frable net. Thank God it hasn't broke.
How old is it?
It's old, man. About 12
You might want
years.
to order one just for this day.
I have the same backpack that I've had since high school that I keep all my gear in. You know, but maybe I gotta stop being so superstitious.
You know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right?
Yeah, that's
It's
what I'm
working for
saying.
you
Yeah.
know? Now you get the new backpack and the fish don't hit. You know?
Yeah.
You find out.
You'll find out real quick.
So MEPS, spinners. And that's great because, as you said, for someone that just wants to dabble in this, it's as simple as you can. You can't mess that up.
Yeah, you can't get any more. All you got to do is cast it and reel
Cast it out.
Yeah.
As long as you feel the vibration is working. If you don't feel it vibrating, you know it's twisted up and you got to fix it. But okay, so MEPS.
Do you ever change the size based on the conditions, like higher water, lower water, colder water?
Yeah. So I will say my standard is always a size 3. Sometimes I'll go up a size, say like, the root will be dirty, or, the pike or Milwaukee, it'll be a little dirtier. And then 2, like when it drops, a size 3, or then you can use a size 2. If the water is really clear, I'll use a size 2. But definitely if it is dirty, I like to step up to a size 4. I don't really get much bigger than that. But yeah, I mean, the water clarity plays a big thing too.
So I noticed this. I want to see if you noticed this. But last fall when I was fishing the root for the coho, I had a lot more of my success with smaller profile cranks.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? Is it something about the smaller profiles that
I think
really keen on?
I think that like I saw a lot of guys using like real small stick baits, and that was real cool. Like I think it's just they can chase it and get it in their mouth. But yeah, like the size. What is it? Not the size 7 flickers. The size down below
The
that.
6?
Yeah, the 6s or the 5s. I did really good on the coho with that. Like before they actually went up the river. But
Yeah.
it's I think last year sometimes there was so many stuff that they wanted, you weren't doing it wrong.
Yeah.
But each year is kind of different. But those size 5 and 6 flickers last year were really good too for cranks, or like a 2 to 3 inch husky jerk was really good too.
Small profiles.
Yeah.
And you're fishing in that water. It's like 7 feet deep.
Yeah.
In some places it gets a little hole here, but for the most part, it's
Yeah, the
not
root,
too deep.
once you get so far up, it's real shallow.
Yeah.
Like Lincoln Park and Island Park, sometimes your deepest spot's only 4 feet.
Yeah.
So that works out. Any other? You mentioned the flicker shads. Any other kind of cranks that you like to run with?
I used a lot of Lucky Crafts last year.
Okay.
Yeah, I really messed with them. I think they're the Pointer 78s. I caught some fish on. It's a hard bait to cast because they're a little expensive. You hate losing them. Like, oh man, there's $14, but they have great action too. We were flatlining a lot of them trolling like in a boat, and man, they work really good too.
Yeah. Those days when the spinner isn't connecting, when the cranks ain't connecting, you dropping eggs in, right?
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about that, because you're really, I think Rob has mentioned, you're really well known for the egg stuff as well.
You feel like a scientist when you're curing eggs. I always tell people, I'll get messages, oh, my eggs don't look right. They don't look right. It's really just little details. You want to pay attention. I use a lot of, different cures, fire cure, Boraxifier, Atlas's stuff, but it's just read the bottle. I'd rather use a little bit, not knowing what I'm getting into, curing your eggs, and then go from there. But it really pink, red, orange, natural, you can't go wrong. As the season goes on, I like pink and red. I mean, those are my two favorite colors. But like for everyone that just starts curing eggs, you just want to use a little bit, and then your next batch, experiment with a little bit more cure and go from there.
Yeah. When it comes to, and I think we're going to actually probably do something, a standalone content piece with you where we can dive into that a little bit more. So be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of fishing with it, there's different ways. You could throw it on a hook. Some guys use the loop and stuff like that. Any preference for you, pros and cons to some of these different ways to float it?
I'll say I use an egg loop knot, and I used to be not against it, but you know how you get stuck in your ways where you just throw it on a hook, and then you say you got a group of 5 people, they're all casting it off. It's like, oh my gosh, what do you do? Then my helper at the time, Ryan, he goes, dude, just tie an egg loop knot. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he showed me. It's like a game changer. You can trim the eggs around the hook, kind of bury the hook so they can't see it, and trim the eggs into a nice ball. I mean, it's
a cleaner presentation. It allows you to give a cleaner presentation.
It's just a cleaner presentation. It's easier, and you're not going through eggs left and right. Especially too, even if you're a weekend warrior, say you only have a loaf of eggs. You're not casting it off with an egg loop knot. That's the good thing.
What about any difference in hookup percentages? Do you notice about the same, different?
About the same.
Okay.
You're still gonna miss some, but you're gonna hook some too.
Yeah.
When do you make the change from using skein to using spawn sacks?
Probably right about now. So say, you're fishing the harbor right now. Some of those kings, they've been in there. They're a little bit more finicky. You tie like a chartreuse or red sack, like a quarter size, you'll have success on it. I always forget, like every year, sometimes you got to make a mental note to remember, like, hey, these kings will eat spawn sacks too. You just got to remember to do it, But really right now, this week, next week, I'll probably tie some loose. I got a couple kings that are loose that I'll tie sacks in and try it.
Let me ask you this: what's so different in terms of why you want to switch this from going from a skein to actually a tied sack? What's the difference? How does that play into everything?
I think sometimes like you're more like finesse fishing. Like the sack's a little, like say you got like a real picky fish, the skein might just be too much for him. Even if you just have a little small, like, because you can cut your skein to what you want.
Right.
But sometimes too, I just think like if they're more picky, they've been in the harbor so long. Because I remember last year I was catching them on sacks and I was kind of surprised they weren't hitting skein, so I just tried it, and out of a whim it worked. But sometimes, those fish have been in there so long, it's something different for them, and I'll actually use lighter line too. Like I usually use 15-pound fluorocarbon for skein fishing. I went to 12 with a sack, and then I started catching them. But then it gets you to think, was it the sack or
was it the line?
Did I down? But you never know. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. When you fish, you're always thinking like, oh, was it the line now? But who knows?
So, the right way and the wrong way to be fishing skein / sacks from the shore, from the bank, for someone that's newer into this, some tips and some things they should be mindful of as they're trying to float this stuff.
Like a general setup?
Like a general setup, and then, how they should be fishing it to get the most out of it, the most effective way. Because I can't imagine you just chuck it in the water and you just let it sit there, perhaps, right?
I love float fishing. Like a 15 to 20 pound braid main line I use with a float bobber, and then 15 to 12 pound fluorocarbon. I use a 1/0 though for my skein. What do you use?
I use about the same.
Yeah.
I can go anywhere from like a 2 to a 1/0 and
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing okay.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. But really, like if you see like fish, especially from shore, what I'm looking at, because you don't have live scope or you don't have electronics on shore.
Right.
If you're seeing fish moving or busting, or they're jumping across from you, but you can get over there, you just simply move and just keep moving your bobber around, because you just don't ever know. Sometimes they're 20 feet off from the rocks, sometimes they're 5 feet off from the rocks. But the main thing is you just got to keep moving around and find those active fish.
And sometimes just adding a little movement to the bobber is all it takes.
I've noticed it too, like over the years. I never really realized it. Like when you mend your line sometimes, you don't know if you're pulling it away from a fish. There's so many times lately where I've mend my line with a skein rod or a bobber rod, and then that bobber goes right down. Like, it's just a lot to think about.
That is pretty interesting. Now, when you're fishing in a harbor, it's pretty stagnant water. You have some areas, depends where you're at, that may have some movement in the water.
Yeah.
But I think generally it's pretty still compared to a river like a Rood or Milwaukee River, where it's more of a flow.
Yep.
How are you presenting, your float and your skein, your sack in both of those scenarios?
I kind of do it the same way, but I try and time it in the harbor. So, like, say, Wednesday, it's going to be very light wind. The harbor's not going to be the best. Those fish are kind of spooky. But say Thursday, it's a real hard wind. Sometimes that hard wind in the harbor kind of gets them going. It's moving your bobber around. You don't have to cast it as much, or they're pushed to, say you have a north wind and then on the South Shore rocks, they're pushed up against there. You kind of got to time it like that. But the river fishing, it is nice just drifting a bobber. You're covering a lot more ground. But in the harbor, what I really like to look at is windy days. I like fishing when there's actually some good wind. Not to say you can't catch them on a calm day, but if you're in Racine and Kenosha, those harbors are clear. Sometimes, on those flat, calm days, it gets a little tough.
Yeah, because it's super stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you never really realize when there's no wind how much that harbor is Kenosha, Racine. They just don't move. Nothing happens.
Yep.
Yeah, it gets like
I
that.
find harbor fish in general can be a little more finicky than river fish.
Yeah. The thing with the river fish is you're going to have fish moving, or you're going to have fish staying in the hole. You kind of have both worlds going in your favor. At least that there's fish there and moving, and you're not as spooked because the root or the root's kind of a silky it's kind of always dingy water. Even like the Milwaukee, it's a clear river, but it's flowing constantly, so those fish aren't as spooked.
Yeah, I think that definitely helps. When now this is all in October. We're talking about as coho are starting to move in. These are all tactics that are going to be very effective for these coho.
Yep.
And all that stuff. And as they start to trickle in, they'll move into harbors. They'll move into some of these harbors that have the rivers that feed into them, like the Root in Milwaukee. They'll set up at the beginning. For someone that wants to go out there, when you think about where to set up on these rivers, because there's a lot of miles to cover.
Yeah.
How should someone think about where should they try and start? Obviously, these fish are going to, day by day, week by week, start to move up along. How can they think about where I should start? And do I start at the base of the river? Do I move all the way to the top, location-wise?
So now I would say, we're so far along with the run now. You kind of think, and what I'm thinking of, we just got rain and, end of October, kind of. A lot of these fish are going to be, from the dam really to Lincoln Park, or they're going to mostly be upriver, just because we're so along with the run. But
are you talking about kings, just to clarify?
Kings right now.
Okay, yeah.
But the cohos, they're kind of spread out. You still have, they're still catching some, there's still some fish to be had casting on the lakeside. We'll see those cohos gradually come up week by week. But the cohos, I would say the lower sections, they're still there.
And a lot of it's going to have to do with the stream flow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. If the root's over 100, you better fish upriver. Even for as we're getting farther along in the year, the cohos will be up there eventually.
And in hundreds in cubic feet per sec,
Yeah, 100 feet per second.
Is that a good flow? Is that when it's
that's
ripping?
a decent
It's not
flow.
bad. It's a little low, but not bad.
Okay.
Isn't it crazy?
It's like the low end of it.
Yeah, last week it was at 22.
Right.
Yeah,
you couldn't get over 50 for most of the
I know.
fall.
Even last year it was low too, but you get that rush of rain like we just had. It does always help push fish up.
I was gonna say, it rained for most of the week last week. It was pretty nasty, and I could imagine that it. I don't know. I haven't been over there, but I wanted to. But I figured that it's probably blew out that water for one.
Yeah, it blew it out.
And so when you're thinking about that situation for an angler, rain is good. It's going to help get things going, but it's going to also mess up that water. Should you wait a few days until it settles to go out there? Do you fish it while it's moving and nasty? Or
here's the best advice. So what I do is it's an app called Rivercast. You can't go wrong. Watch your flow. Watching the flow will only help you catch more fish. If the river's on the rise, those fish are moving. It's kind of hard to fish them. But if the river's on the decline, let it decline for a day or two and then go and fish it. Let that water clear up. So sometimes when those fish are on the decline, say it's getting low, it's 100, but it just was 300. Those fish will sit there. They're going to sit there in that hole then. Then those fish are easier to fish for.
And each river has a different prime
flow.
Prime
flow.
The root, if you're 100 to even 400, you're going to be able to catch some fish.
Yeah.
Pike Creek though, it's 60, 70.
60, 70. Even the Milwaukee, 500, 1,500, I would say. But, I like fishing a declining river than I do a rising river because that can be tough.
Yeah.
I was going to say for a lot of reasons, especially you know, if you're talking about a float, now that float is you drop it in, it's just already back here already, right?
I will say though, if you're fishing and the water's high, you got to kind of read the water. Usually the flowest, when you're fishing the river, it's usually the run closest to you where it's a little slower, not in the middle. You're fishing kind of the edges because those fish, let's be real, they don't want to sit in the fastest water possible.
Right.
They're always on that edge, especially, the salmon. They're going to die in a couple weeks, so they're going to be right on that edge.
Yeah. I noticed that a lot with live scope, especially, when I'm trolling the harbors and all that stuff. And you have a lot of guys from shore just yoinking it out into the middle, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I'm like, my God, if only I could do a pass about 15 feet off of off the wall that you're casting off. And it's funny because I'm trying to get in here, you're trying to get out here.
Yeah.
But I noticed that a lot of these fish will run up along the seawall into the harbors, and a lot of guys are overcasting. They got bobbers way out, and put it in front of you.
Yeah, I think it
near,
is.
near, you know.
A lot of people see the boats out there like, okay, that's where they are. Well, some of the boats, we're just trying to stay out of your way, but the fish are right there in front of you.
Yeah. And that's usually me. Guys will be on shore. I'll angle out. As soon as there's like a gap between guys on the shore, I'll cut in for a pass. And they look at me. I'm like, I'm trying to be right here. Okay, let's now move into November. We're almost there anyway. We're about 2 weeks away or so.
Yeah, it isn't crazy. It's going quick.
It is going quick. Coho are doing their thing. At this point, it's all but done for the Kings. Coho have moved up, and they're on the back end of their thing. Water temps are getting to be frigid again.
Yep.
Cold temps. What opportunities do we have for fishing come November?
Well, minus the coho, the browns start to make their appearance. That's like by far one of my favorite fish. The brown trout, they'll start moving in, like if not this month, but November is like the month where we start to really see decent numbers of them. And the thing that I like about brown trout is you have so many different ways that you can fish them. Mm-hmm. You can cast, crank, spinners. You can fish them under a bobber, tube jigs, hair jigs. There's just so many options. But really what you want to think about too is they're not going to be way up the river. So you got to cut that out. They're going to start in the harbors, lower rivers, and they're not really ready to spawn yet. So you got to start in the harbors and kind of slowly work your way up. You kind of follow them.
Now, one cool thing about browns is that whether people know this or not, they're pretty opportunistic, which is what you spoke to basically in terms of like all the variety of things you can use. There was a couple years ago, Rob was out there and I joined them, and it was, what was it, like February? It was really cold. We're getting to the early year, but from that cold period when they're in their winter period, we were fishing, and it was so lights out that he started throwing. I
was getting them on like big swim baits,
yeah.
like the jointed rubber, and it was amazing.
Yeah, and that's what I mean too. Like, there's so many different options that like you can catch them that I overlook or you There's just so many different. Yeah. That's why I love them.
And it's cool too because for those folks that are big bass anglers or walleye anglers, the rod and the reels that you have and most of your cranks and your swim baits and stuff, they're gonna work. There's a good chance that they're gonna carry over
any
for
jerk
browns.
bait will work.
Yeah. Lucky Crafts work, flickers, square bills. You can name. I've seen guys get them on rattle traps. That wouldn't be my first choice, but I've seen them catch it.
Yep.
But yeah, browns on my personal list are number one by far.
So while they can be very opportunistic and you have a wide selection of lures to choose from, they can also be very finicky. Very arguably some of the most pickiest fish that are in the lake.
Yeah.
How do you target? What are you doing to catch them on those days when they're just really finicky and picky?
I like to use I use a lot of floats. I'll tie a longer leader, like 6 pound fluoro. Use small hair jigs or a small tube jig.
6 pound leader.
Yeah.
Fluoro? Wow.
So I'll still use braided line.
Sure.
But I'll tie like a 3 to 4 foot leader
of 6 pound.
Yeah.
Now someone might I'm looking at you like 6 pound because there's big browns. We have big browns. You can. This is a world class brown fishery.
I always warn the customers like, hey, this is a light leader. Like if I'm handing you the rod, so don't powerhouse. The thing with browns is sometimes that bobber goes down. You can just reel into them because we're using such long rods that they're gonna head shake that hook into their jaw anyways. But you wanna you're using just light setups, and sometimes I'll use like a fixed float too, a super small fixed float, because I noticed over the years that if I'm using a good size float, they don't like it. They see it, especially in the harbor. Like if there's no wind or they can be finicky in Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee when that water's super gin clear, especially when the water's cold like that. They know what's going on.
They do have this weird sense.
They do. Or you'll just have them say you're casting cranks and they'll follow it up to a certain point. It's almost like deer hunting. Oh yeah, we saw you.
Well, they remind me of pike in that regard. If you're fish a pike and they'll just follow it up. You're like, oh come on, you're right there. You're trying to twitch it a couple times. They just peel off. And I've seen that so many times where they'll follow it right up a thin fish. Or whatever it may be, and I'm like, nope, never mind. And you're like, oh, come on, man.
I forgot about the thin fish.
Yep.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you forgot I was going to say which one's your favorite one to use.
Oh man,
What
that's
color?
a tough one. It's either the red one or that orange tiger.
Okay.
The red one's like an OG. That's like the
What,
first
red
one.
squiggle?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the first one I ever had.
So you're really going light
Yeah.
in these instances. Light everything. And downsizing bobbers.
It'll screw you up a little bit because you're so accustomed to fishing them a certain way, but once you get your setup like a light setup and you see the bites you're gonna get, it all makes sense. But that's mostly in the harbor. Like I'm doing that more in the harbor, light setups, or sometimes like last year there was so many fish like hugging the wall in certain harbors. I was taking the bobber off and just casting a hair jig with a long leader and just kind of working it like that because when it lands in the water, it's not such a commotion when it's just a jig.
Yeah.
Not with a bobber. But you pay attention to little stuff like that, it'll only catch you more fish.
So you're just pretty much just jigging a hair jig?
Yeah, jigging a hair jig.
What's your tackle setup, rod reel, length, sizing, all this stuff for this kind of light line brown application?
I use a lot of like 8'6", 9-foot rods.
Okay.
Like a 2500 reel.
Okay.
I use lighter braid that time, like 10 to 15 pound, but tie a long leader, a long floral leader, 6 pounds I was using last year.
Yeah.
Trust me, I was a little nervous too, but once you get those bites, it's like, okay, that's what it is.
Downsizing with that light of a leader, did you notice you catching more or losing more fish than before?
I caught more when I was like, when the conditions were like rough in the harbor, when it's like clear water, not much wind, I caught way more fish doing it like that.
So it's worth that trade-off.
It's worth that,
because you can definitely break fish off a lot more.
Oh yeah,
if you don't play them right.
That's the thing too, is just take your time. You use your longer rod. I use a longer rod. It kind of helps absorb, so it's not so much stress on the line.
Yeah.
But I would always tell, like if I had a customer, it's light line, just don't horse them. Just let him do his thing. Drag set, hold on.
Let me see. We in terms of cranks, I know we touched on some of the cranks that briefly, but any particulars that you like for some of these browns, if you're throwing cranks at all?
A thin fish. I'm so glad someone said it because I almost forgot. The thin fish is one of my favorite. I like a flicker shad, works really good. I was really into the pointers by Lucky Craft last year because it's nice because you can bomb those things as far as you can, and they have a good action. Some square bills I like too, but you really can't go wrong with a thin fish or a Lucky Craft or really anything in that nature.
What about you mentioned the MEPs for the cohos? Do you use spinners at all?
I do in the river. So the browns will first, when they first kind of show up in the river, I really like casting MEPs at them. That's a really deadly combo for them too, or little stick baits when they're up in the river.
Little guys?
Yeah, little ones.
It's like 3 inches?
3 inches. So like if the water's right, and it's still kind of clear, that smaller presentation will only help you get more bites. Like they're not going to go out of their way and whack something 5 inches in the river, but the 3-inch little like stick bait or something like that works great.
Now these fish, unlike the kings, they stop feeding. Are browns still? Do we know if they're still feeding? Do they still feed at this period?
Yeah,
actively feed.
Yeah, one of my favorite times is drift in the river. Like you'll get a bunch of browns that are dropping eggs. That kind of like sparks up the whole river because then you get fish that are behind them eating eggs, and then you get say there's browns right here spawning. These fish are eating their eggs. Then those fish are spawning. Those fish are dropping back. The ones that just spawned, and those fish want to eat because they're tired from spawning. Yeah. It's like that's probably one of my favorite times when. As soon as you get those like 10 to 15 browns that are laying eggs, and then it just games on in the river.
It's like an infinite fishing glitch.
It is, man. It's just it's like a rotation. You get some that are spawning, and you get some that are dropping back. But the drop back browns are really aggressive. Like I've caught the same brown one time. Like I want to say it was like twice in a day, but it's just weird. Like they just don't stop some days. But
it makes sense though. Like they finished this big thing that took a lot of energy out of them, and they need to replenish as much as possible. So
yeah.
Is this when you start fishing more with beads?
Yeah, I really do enjoy bead fishing, and bead fishing really takes off when there's eggs in the system. Like, I would get my butt kicked in fishing Milwaukee. Those boys would only fish beads, and like I was just kind of new to it, and then it just opens your eyes to like, okay, these beads resemble single eggs. Then I started doing it in the rut, and then you start catching more fish. It's just kind of crazy.
you kind of just answered, I guess, the question, which is, skiing, you got a sack, and then you got a single bead. Like, why are these different preferences from one to the other? And until you get to like these plastic beads, which is so interesting. To me.
It's weird. It's like the skein is always like September, half October.
Right.
Then the sacks like October, November, and then like I shouldn't say that because I still use beads right now too. But you kind of skein's always first, I'll say.
Yeah.
And then you can do sack or bead, and then spinner, but it's kind of preference. Honestly, everyone's different. But usually I start with skein.
Now, when you're fishing a bead, is there anything different you need to be doing in terms of how you present it compared to a sack?
Not really. Like,
same
if
thing,
you're
just
fishing it in the river, you're really just drifting it. So I've seen, I won't run a double bead rig in the rut, but I'll run a double bead rig, say in the Milwaukee. It's just a little bit deeper, 8-9 feet. Some of it.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of guys do good on beads, single bead or double bead rig. But so say like Racine and Kenosha, if I'm running a bead, I'm only running one. Milwaukee, I'll run two. But Milwaukee's a little bit cleaner and a little deeper.
How do you decide on colors for these beads? I mean, we have a wide selection of beads here. With a lot of blue beads. We got some new ones that are like these softer.
We got the BNR soft beads.
Yep. So, and they come in a wide selection of colors and stuff like that. When you're thinking about color selection for your beads, what do you like?
One of my favorite ones is by Bloop. It's the butter bead. So it's like yellow, so it resembles the brown trout egg.
With the single red dot.
Yeah, the single red dot. Yeah. So like all these eggs, when they're old in the system, they always get that eye. But that blue bead's like a perfect color. Like where you could say it, kind of looks like a king egg, but it's really for brown trout. But that yellowish kind of, even like a chartreuse, something, more natural works the best sometimes for me.
Got you.
What about the size of the bead? What sizes do you like?
So if the water's real clear, say the water's clear, I'll use an 8 millimeter. And then if the water's like a little higher, I'll go to 10. Mm-hmm. But in Milwaukee, I know a lot of guys just stick with 10 the whole time. But I like to switch it up. It's just kind of how I do it.
That's pretty cool. So this is now November. You've got browns, and you're doing your brown fishing. Harbors, we all know they all come back into most of these harbors, and those harbors that they have the rivers, they'll start to do some of their stuff in the lower parts of that river. As we move into December, what are we looking at in terms of fishing opportunities? Browns are still around. Anything else coming in?
We start to see a steelhead or rainbow trout, whatever you want to call them. But mostly that month of December, is there some fish to be had in the harbors? Yes. But it just seems like there's so much more fish upriver with some fish spawning. So then the rainbows will, say the browns are upriver doing their thing. The rainbows, you'll start catching them downriver. They're kind of in there just eating eggs. Some of our better rainbow trout fishing is actually in the month of December.
I was gonna say that's my favorite time to catch them.
I mean, it's a blast. I mean, when they're coming in the river to eat, that's like the only reason they're coming in there. I mean, do we catch a few that have some loose eggs? Yeah, but very few and far between. But those rainbows, they come into our river like that, our harbor. They're just simply coming in there to eat, and that's probably number 2 on my list to catch are those rainbows that time of year.
It's fun, man, because I mean, they put on a aerobatic show, and when you're light and fishing them, it's just a thrill.
It's so fun because here's the thing too: if you're float fishing them and you miss them, and you get it out quick enough, he'll bite again. As long as you don't hook them, That's the thing that I like about rainbows. Like, they're very aggressive.
Yeah, and you get the beautiful color on them at that time of the year.
Yeah, you get some of those males that have like a hook jaw and they have the bright red
stripe,
line on it. They're so pretty.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. There was 2, maybe 3 years ago. It was November, and the browns and the steelhead were all mixed in. It was just lights out. One rod go off, it's a brown, another one's a steelhead.
Yeah.
And it was just, so there could be some overlapping.
Yeah.
Which is super exciting.
Well,
as
that's the fun thing too. Like brown, like they're so aggressive some days where you can catch both at the same time, same spot. That's what I like.
And Coho's will still be there too.
Yeah, especially like last year was, we were catching browns, rainbows, and cohos all in one spot. Mm-hmm. Who knows? I mean, I would love to see it like that this year again.
It's so cool because, again, everyone looks forward to the Kings. It's certainly the highlight of the year. But then I think a lot of folks kind of, once that's done, they kind of put everything outside their mind. And here we are talking about cohos you can still get into.
Yeah.
You can then in November and December, you've got browns and steelhead coming in there. And not to mention, right, not that in our area it's really super prevalent, but if you're in the southern basin, further south in Chicago, Indiana, you've got perch going off. And, in Thanksgiving all the way through ice over and all that stuff, you got perch fishing opportunities.
The lake trout.
Yeah.
And then lake trout
I've never done it. I got to do it.
Yeah. And again, I think that's probably, I don't know enough about Lakers up here, but I know down Chicago, they'll come into the harbors. Like, I love Burnham Harbor.
Yeah.
Burnham Harbor is, man, I'm going to tell you, Burnham Harbor is super underrated for brown trout.
Really?
Oh, my God. You got Soldier Field in the background.
Yeah.
Super underrated.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's really, really good. And then you go out to the lighthouse and the breakwall, and you could get Lakers all day to your heart's content, jigging and light line. It's ridiculous. I mean, you'll get tired of catching them.
I got to get one for the wall.
Well, there's a giant. There's the giants down there.
Yeah.
But again, it just goes to speaking to their whole conversation right now. You've got all of these fish that you can catch right from shore. You don't even have to bring out the boat if you don't want to. If we haven't gotten the ice over yet, and you have a small boat, still a great opportunity to take advantage of it, man.
Yeah, I think the fishing actually gets better as it gets colder into December.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it just gets better and better.
That's what I like. So November comes around, you get some guys that are going hunting. River gets a little quiet. Fishing is still fantastic. Yeah. Then December gets a little colder. People don't want to deal with the cold. Yeah. Fishing is still fantastic. Like last year, we didn't ice fish till January 20th. January, it was as good as it could get for trout fishing. I'd never seen it that good, but nobody was there. It was like really cool. Like, oh, okay. You could move anywhere you wanted and catch fish. But these 3 months are my favorite. There's just so many opportunities. There's so many places you can go and catch a fish. It's just hard to
Sometimes you can have the day, what do I want to catch today?
Yeah.
Where do I want to go? Do I want to hit the river? Do I want to go to the harbor? And what harbor do I want to go to? It can be like analysis paralysis because you're like, there's so many good options.
That's how I feel like once November hits. Like, the river is always going to have fish. Then you get fish in the harbor. And then you can catch them. Last year the guys were catching them on South and North Pier or just casting out into the lake. I mean, there's so many options.
It is. Now, in the perspective of you running, doing charters, your season then moves on to shore guiding and stuff, correct?
Yep.
In those situations, how do you decide, right? If you got clients, you got a group of guys that can come out with you, how do you decide? Do they say, hey, we'd like to go out for browns or this, and then you just decide where you're going to go? Or
yeah, really, it's by month. So like September, October, salmon, and then I'm usually one of those guys. I'll take 2 weeks off November to hunt, and then once I come back, it's brown trout, and then all through December is brown trout, rainbow trout, really whatever we can catch. But it's I hate to say I love running a charter boat, but I love by far doing river trips. It's just so much more fun. It's more hands-on. It's just there's more opportunity from shore than running
that's one thing. The brown trout give you a ton of opportunity because they start spawning basically like now almost.
Yep.
And then there'll be different fish coming in spawning throughout the entire fall into the winter. And we'll catch brown trout in the spring that are still spawning.
I know. Not to jump ahead, I was going to say that. Like last year and years before that, like March was a great month for browns. We were still catching them, and not just in the river, but like
I think March is one of my favorite times to catch them because they're usually really aggressive as soon as that ice is out.
You get those drop back browns. They're done spawning. They're real aggressive. You know, the kayak guys do so good. Like, I almost bought a kayak. Well, now I have a boat, but I was so tempted to buy a kayak. I remember that one time you kept going past me and you were hooked up every time. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't get one right here. And like every time you passed me, I'd see your little arm go back. I'd see that. I'm like, are you kidding me?
The arm reach back.
I can't get one right here.
What were you using that day?
Probably a thin fish.
Yeah, I think you were. It was a purple one.
Purple one's my favorite.
I remember.
Purple. That's why I asked you what you want. The purple.
Purple one's my favorite.
One does.
Yeah. I like the gold with the red back. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Oh man, the thin fins. I've caught a lot of fish on those things.
Speaking of which, I was out there today before we came here, and the sole hit I took, and it was hooked up briefly, where it must have not hit it fully, but it on the new thin fish we got, that's the gold with the little tail, red tip.
The red tail to it.
Yeah, that one took the only action today. So some signs on.
Did you catch it?
No, it hit rod off. One of those. So it must
Sheephead.
Sheephead. You know what's weird is I haven't caught one in a couple of years. It used to be my first fish I'd catch all the time during the king run. Like, you're casting out there, say it's the end of August, and you're so excited to hook one. It's a sheep's head. Like, are you kidding me?
I'll tell you what. If you want sheepheads galore, the breakwall Kenosha at the southern point.
Oh yeah,
just throw it right over the edge.
Yeah.
They sit right there. If you accidentally get too close, there will always be a sheephead that will smack your reef runner, your flicker, or whatever.
Oh,
never
man.
fails.
They do fight hard though. I'll give them that.
For a minute, they give you for a minute. You're like, oh, it's a king, and then like, wait a minute, it just went limp, but it's on the line. You just feel that weight.
We caught one last year in a charter, and the guy kept it. And I didn't really know how to, like, it kind of threw me off how to play it. Because they're so big.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin? So a lot of fishing opportunities, which is the exciting part. Now, I want to bring this up now, and I think this is going to be something we'll probably bring up in future podcasts because it'd be interesting to see people's thoughts on this. We're going into a winter where we're going to have the El Nino winter.
Yeah, that's what they're
calling it. And so I know Tom Skilling here, so I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But from my understanding, from what I gathered, is that it's supposed to be predicted to be a severe winter, which if that holds true, that could obviously impact a lot of the fish, the bait over the winter period and all that stuff. Just your thoughts on worst case scenario, we get a really bad winter. What happens? Do we see that impact 4 years from now? Do we see that the next fishing season? Like, what do you think?
It's going to be kind of tough. It kind of all depends, like, how high the river is. If the river's high where those fish can travel underneath the ice and still kind of do their thing, I think we'll be okay. But if the river's low to where they can't get up there and there's a lot of ice, then I don't know. It'll be kind of tough. It's... we haven't had a real cold winter here in 4 years. I mean,
longer than that. I can't remember. We had like winters, like there'd be like a 1 week period where it got really, really cold.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of a foot of snow, but nothing like for 2 or 3 months long.
No. I mean, but I think it all kind of depends like when it is. Like if it's late January or, February, I think we'll be okay. But if it's early on, like say December, that'll make things a little tough. So like it
extends it longer.
Yeah,
that's what you're saying.
It'll just make it a little tougher fishing, I feel. Because then when we get ice, that water gets clear, and those fish get smart. Ice fishing is a little bit more tougher, than drifting or fishing when there's no ice, because that water gets clear. Like you can read a book sometimes if you're in the shack, on the bottom of the hole. It's real clear water you're dealing with.
So let's talk about it, because even when these harbors freeze up and all that stuff, there you go, ice fishing now.
That's the thing too, ice fishing. Yeah.
I don't think, and I'm sorry to cut you off, I don't think enough people know that like ice fishing Lake Michigan is a thing.
Yeah, it's still really good fish. Like you think ice fishing, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, you're thinking big trout, but you're finesse fishing because that water's clear. Those fish are spooky. And that's another thing too. I use a lot of light line, 8-pound to 6-pound test line just to get that bite. You just can't horse them.
Yep.
Got to take your time. Are you in terms of fishing through the ice? What are you using? What do you prefer? What do you like?
So I use a lot of autos. So I'll go kind of like break down like 33s, 35-inch rods, 38-inch rods. I like with my autos. I know people use those jaw jackers too. Those work well too. But I like using 8-pound mainline to 6-pound fluoro with spawn. With a minnow, I'll use 8-pound mainline to 8-pound fluoro. Just sometimes those minnows, they get hit a little harder. But then I do like jigging too, big tube jigs for them too. I'll just use 6-pound fluoro for that. Just jig them. That's one of my favorite. I love hooking.
Which size tube jigs are you using?
Yeah,
those 2.5-inch.
Okay.
Or 2-inch. Sometimes if it's super clear, I have caught them on 1.5 inch, but usually 2-inchers work perfect.
and what size head is inside of them?
Oh man,
Probably 16th or
I think it's
32nd
the
ounce.
16th or 32nd.
So
Yeah,
it's 2-inch white. I'm presuming.
yeah, white and
Okay.
pearl. Isn't it crazy? Like, what makes a white tube jig so attractive to a brown
Right.
trout? Like, what is it?
I mean, the first brown I ever caught through the ice was on a white tube jig.
Yeah, I mean, I have about 100 of them.
Yep.
I mean, I don't get what makes them go, but they always work every year.
Yeah. They
Once
do.
in a while, green. Water's dirty, like
Yeah,
the greens
yep.
and the chartreuse and lime kind of color will work, but usually it's just white or pearl.
I have seen too quite a few guys jigging like more spoons for browns, catching them. That
Yep.
you know how, like I said, I get stuck in my ways where I'm using, white or pearl tube, and then a guy shows up and, hey, can you help me with your fish? And then he has on like a clam jigging spoon. Like,
Yep.
oh man, why did I think of that? But like there's a lot of options ice fishing. You can jig
Yeah.
honestly anything you want.
Yeah,
You
I've
never
caught
know.
them on jigging wraps and Swedish pimples and a bunch of stuff, but still, like, a tube jig is
Yeah,
outfished
it's
all those things over
always
time.
gets 'em, yeah.
Like, if you're just going to pick out one thing to jig for browns, just go down there with the tube jig.
Yep.
That's all you need.
Now, is that tube jig naked or are you tipping it with anything?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't tip it.
Okay.
I know a lot of guys do, and I don't think it hurts that you do or don't, because if you're constantly moving it, I think they're gonna hit it if they want it.
Right.
But
Any scent?
I do use some scent.
So this is why we ask those questions, because he'll say the tube jig, but you gotta ask like, what size head are you using with it? Or is it tipped or not tipped?
we're getting into the secrets now. I like Potsky makes a fire gel. I use like some garlic, and it actually does add a little color to it. But I like the garlic scent in the winter, because as it stays on all day. But it's strong that first hour or whatever, then it starts to kind of wear off. That's when it starts to work. Like,
It's almost like glow, right? Because
Yeah.
guys will overglow their stuff, and,
Yep.
and guys will, I'll tell them like, guys, just one quick little pass, because guess what? When you cast it out there after you've nuked it bright,
yep.
guess what happens? Look at that color when you actually caught that fish. It's
Yeah.
real faint at that point.
Yeah, and that's like when using scent too. It's always like when you can just smell enough that it's on there, and then you catch them. But yeah, that fire gel, I use it a lot, like on jigs, spinners, kind of cranks. You can't go wrong with it. But talking about ice fishing, they work really good with the tube jigs because you can fold up the tentacles, and it's like
The pocket in there.
there's like a pocket in there. I just put it in there, it just holds in there. It's crazy because sometimes I'll catch the browns and you'll see it like in their teeth smeared from grabbing the tube, like squishing it out of the tube jig. I get a kick out of it.
And you also said you actually will use live bait. You said, right? Minnows.
Yeah.
With fatheads, are you using roaches? What?
I'll say, man, if I had to pick three, one's an extra large fathead.
Okay.
And I like small shiners, medium shiners, and I really like the big rosies. They make these extra large rosies. That was something different the last 2 years I've been doing. I'll say the rosies work good in like medium to kind of cloudy water. Like that's like a little, that's like
Makes sense. It just sticks out a little bit
a
more.
little
Right?
sticks out.
Yeah.
I've had like those, sometimes them rosies save the day some days, but fatheads work great, dude. Like those extra large fatheads, like a brown just crushes them. Like I love seeing, your fathead rods just banging in like an aisle. Like, okay, we got one. Like he's not coming off. He just ate that minnow.
It's all the way down. all the way down. That's pretty awesome. Now, we talked about September, October, November, December. We're talking about ice over now, which in the last couple of years we had very short windows for ice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really short. And once that ice comes off, we're kind of back in that scenario of how you fish November, December, right?
Yeah, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're fishing upriver for the browns or rainbows that are still in the river. Then you can fish the harbor for drop back fish or fish that are still pushing up. You just have a lot of options. I mean, I think, what did we lose ice last year? February?
Yeah, it was pretty early.
It was pretty early. Because it was like maybe a week or two in January we had ice. It was brief.
The thing is like, if it's anything like last year, there was so many fish in different spots. You couldn't honestly go wrong. But with me, I'm always picking like once the river opens up, those fish haven't seen bait, say there's, a month of ice. Those fish, if it's fishable, it opens up. Those fish that are up there haven't seen spawn or anything. Mm-hmm. I'll hit those fish first because they'll be a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah. You're kind of getting first dibs on these fish before the waves come in there, again.
And that's the thing too. When I know I said it earlier, look at your flow chart. That flow chart helps the most, because it'll say, well, it says on mine, like ice flow. As soon as it's warm for a few days and that river drops, it's time to fish.
Yeah. So do you ever take breaks outside of the hunting for 2 weeks? Is it just a nonstop?
Man, it's nonstop. I have took off Sunday and Monday today. And what is today? Tuesday.
Tuesday.
So I'm on a 3-day kick. But here's the thing, then I start tomorrow and I go to Halloween as long as we don't get rain. And then November 1st through the 7th, and I go hunting. I mean, it's taken me years to get to where I am. Like, when I first started doing this, I was just a first mate. And then I just first mate and then fish brown trout the whole season, or kings and then brown trout the whole season, rainbow trout. But it's like taken me a while to get this busy, so I don't want to slow down yet. I kind of appreciate everything. A lot of people have helped me. Rob's helped me along the way. A lot of places have, but eventually I'm going to take a break
Well, I get it, right? You're taking advantage of it while you're young and in good health. You just want to, grind it out. And do all that. So down the road, you can relax a little bit, if you will. I want to switch gears now and ask you on that. I think one of the most impressive things outside of just it's pretty clear if anyone follows you, which I do, and the shop does and all, but anybody that follows you knows like you are a really great, well-rounded angler. I mean, you'll see pictures of you on the shore with a big brown. Next, to see another reel on Instagram from the boat, the summer trips. I mean, you've got it really covered. My question for you is for those other anglers, perhaps they're charter captains or just anglers that want to grow their social media through fishing. What's worked for you? Because you have such a strong presence in social media, which in general, the general fishing landscape isn't always the case, especially for older anglers. They're tried in their old ways, but you're taking advantage of the newer wave. How's that been for you? What's been your strategy for the success?
So the main thing is like what I've done that works is a little bit more videos, because that's for like the younger crowd. They see more videos. People are always watching like reels or vines or TikTok, but the main thing is I'm trying to post like every other day, like just to keep your audience looking. Or like if you're trying to book trips, am I going to go with a guy that posts once a month or he's posting 5-6 times a week? Yep. That's like the main thing. And that's another thing why I'm always fishing, just so I have content to post. Yeah. But you just want to keep posting, keep your audience up. Another thing too is reply to messages as quick as you can. Even if they're just random questions. I get so many questions on how to do setups. Just answer them, because you never know if that guy's going to be your customer down the line. Yeah.
And have you noticed that translating into business for you? Yeah. Is it pretty evident, pretty clear?
Yeah. The more the more humble you are, and people come out to you and ask about setups, and say you give them a paragraph. Well, oh, hey, this guy really helped me. I should just book a trip. Like, you'd be surprised, like, where it leads to. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. And have you thought about doing YouTube yet? Have you done it?
I should. I haven't. If I film with Potsky, I do that. Their YouTube, like with them, but I've never done my own. I should do it, but
I would say do it. You don't have to do the long form. Because you can just take your reels and repurpose them for shorts.
Yeah, I should do shorts. So I don't know why I've never really thought about it.
Because you're already uploading them. I would say
I should do it.
And then you can always do a long form, like a regular.
Yeah, I kind of get into editing the.
Oh, yeah.
Reels. Yeah,
We might nerd out here on this one, guys.
I try and get it like right mixed with the song, but
And the thing is like, believe it or not, you'll look at a short 30-second reel, and people don't know that you spent like an hour and a half doing a 30-second thing, because you're trying to get every little thing there for it to be impactful and stuff like that. But
it's weird, as I have my fiance, she works from home, and I'll come in, hey, watch this reel. She's like, are you kidding me? I have a meeting in like 5 minutes. Just watch it real quick before I publish it. And then, it's always like, oh yeah, it looks good, but I'm like, no, don't say but, because I'm not going back into this video.
Sometimes you gotta full send it. It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and all of that. But I think it's great that I think in general I know in the bass fishing world, it's a lot of younger guys they're doing it, but in the salmon world, we're still kind of lagging behind, generally speaking. In terms of that. And I think all anglers should take advantage of it, man. Post that stuff up there.
Yeah, post them up, man. I mean,
especially if you're running a business.
The more you post, the better it is, and it could be competition against me, but I hate to say, man, like, I'm just doing my thing either way. I'm just going to keep my head forward. So if you're a guide and you're posting, good for you. Keep, try and do it, man. Try and make it. I mean, more power to you if you do. I mean, it's hard, but if you do it, man, it's
a job on top of the job.
Yeah,
it's a job on top of the fishing job, because you got to spend the time to do all that stuff. You fished 8 hours of the day, come home, spend another 3 editing
and then tying sacks.
Do all that. Rob, do you have any more questions for me?
I was going to say, how many spawn sacks usually tied and sitting?
Oh man. So last year, I don't know why I never thought of this. So say I'm booked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The day before a trip, I'd tie as many as I can, and then get through Thursday. Friday, I would just tie like 20 of the color that they liked, and then go another day and I'll just tie 20. But as long as you have like those 100 tied, you're just kind of tying
to replace.
So but if you have a really good day, then you're kind of screwed. Then you got to tie 100.
You got to hire a little helper or something.
I know.
Are you using the machine or just freehand?
I've been freehanding.
Yeah.
I do like the machine, but I like to lay out like just a bunch and then just whip them by as quick as I can.
Mm-hmm. What color do you use most of the time?
Man, chartreuse, pink, and peach.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, Atlas gets the yellow. That's going to be a game changer this year. I think that's going to be a top color.
Mm-hmm.
They got something coming out?
Yeah, yellow netting. I shouldn't say just yellow. They got yellow, purple, and it's like a green kind of. Yeah. But the yellow is what it kind of matches a brown trout egg color. I think it's going to work really good. But chartreuse has always been kind of my favorite. Pink's right up there, and peach is right up there too.
How big are you, in terms of size? How big are your sacks? If you had to kind of measure it against a coin of some sort.
So I would say, ice fishing, a dime to a nickel. Okay. If I'm drifting the river, I like a little bit bigger of a sack so they see it, like a quarter, or like a little bit smaller than a quarter. But I do tie some big sacks sometimes. Just you get more bites.
For anybody listening to this, you just walked in the room. With no context, it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I should have rethought that one.
All right. So, hopefully you guys now have a much more insightful look at all of the wonderful fishing opportunities we have here post King Run. I mean, again, we want to encourage folks to get out there and very accessible, man. Of all the periods of the year, this is one of the best times for shore guys especially to take advantage of and get out there because these fish are right there in the harbors, in the rivers, You take a backpack with a selection of lures, some sacks, and 2 rods, one for casting and one for a float, and you can have a fantastic day. And in a lot of cases, because a lot of guys want to deal with the cold. I know for me, I have to fight through it because I hate being in the cold.
Yeah.
So I have to mentally motivate myself to get out. So there's many people like me. They're like, yeah, forget it. I'll just stay home and all that stuff. If you fight through it, man, you can have phenomenal days. You have a real legit chance of catching personal bests. The 20-pound browns, which are lurking around.
Yep.
Some trophy-sized steelhead that when they come in. Last year we had a phenomenal coho. I mean, like you said, they were averaging 10 pounds in the fall. It was pretty nuts.
We got spoiled.
We really
It'll
did.
probably never be like that.
I was kind of disappointed with this coho. We went back to what we normally have.
I know.
I was like, but the early spring kings made up for it because, man, that was the best spring king fishing I ever had from the kayak.
This king season was great. I mean, spring, summer wise, it was like lights out.
Yeah.
And then it got rough for all the small boat kayakers because we had a fantastic July with the weather.
Yep.
And then August came and we paid for it, man. August, September was rough.
I canceled a lot of trips in August and September. I don't like going out.
And you have a big boat, so that's a lot.
It was just rough. It's hard to take people out in 4 and 5 foot waves, and the fish are kind of out deep. But what can you do? I guess.
Yeah, just kind of that's just how the cookie crumbles. And you know what? We beat up on them pretty good in July, so maybe that was Mother Nature's way of having give them a break. Give them a break for the run. You'll got to see them in a month or two.
I felt bad someday just throwing them all in a pool. Like, man, that first hour, you couldn't keep up. I remember I'd take my hat off. I'm sweating. Like, man, we get one more king bite. Like, what's going on? All 3 downriggers are off. Like, holy crap! But it was fun.
What are your thoughts for kings as a whole this year in terms of number, size? What would you think about the run this year?
I liked it that we caught more. The size was down, but that's what's going to happen when you're dumping some more fish in. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, the trolling aspect of it in June and July and some of August, I mean, I've never caught that many fish or that many kings in a trip. I mean, I think the most I had one time on a trip was 21. I've never had that.
That's insane.
Not all of them were 4-year-olds, but
But just the number of kings.
The number of kings in general was. Yeah. I mean, and then it should be good next year too.
Yeah, there's no reason it won't be.
Yeah. I mean, that's something to look forward to.
It'll probably. I think just on this trend, we ran our King Week event, and so we're keeping the date on the weigh-ins and all that stuff. Yeah. And so we knew we got an average weight across the 3 divisions. It was something about 14 to 16 pounds was the average.
Yeah.
And it pretty much lined up with what we were all catching individually outside of that.
Yeah.
So presumably it could be another year of a lot of numbers of kings around there, but in that middle teen range as an average weight. And me personally, a 10 to 15 pound king, I love those for eating versus the big 20 pluses.
Yeah. And they still fight hard too.
Yeah. No, those guys fight harder sometimes than the bigger fish.
I'm telling you.
Right? They're airborne, their rod's ripping, and you get it in, it's 12 pounds.
Yeah.
And then you catch a 24-pounder, and it just dug down a little bit, comes up.
They take that one, they're big. I mean, if I was a fish, I wouldn't be fighting that hard either. Make that one little
take
rod.
me in, I give up.
Right, I'm done.
Well, Kyle, want to make sure people know where they can reach out to you to get out there in the water, especially what's great about taking advantage of going out with you in the shore side of this, they can pick your brain.
Oh, yeah.
It really gives them a leg up to understand it, kind of pick your brain while you're out there fishing, showing them the stuff, having a good time, and then they can go and build off that knowledge for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys, they just book a trip to learn. I mean, and that's fine with me because, I mean, it is what it is. But really, it's just about your setup and just kind of reading water. That's really what it is. And, like each year I'm learning something too,
Yeah.
You learn stuff as you go.
Definitely. You want to let everybody know where they can check you out to book a trip and check you out on social media?
Facebook and Instagram, Big Boy Fishing. And then I have a website, www.bigboyfishing.com.
Man, we are so grateful. Rob will tell you, we've been trying to track you down for
like 2 years.
2 years.
I know. I apologize.
No, and it's fine. I totally understand because you.
I'd be like, the weather looks like crap for the next couple of days. Let's see if Kyle can get out. No, I'm still fishing.
Yeah.
Like every time he's still fishing. I was like, there's gonna be like a foot of snow, so let's see if we can get Kyle out. No, he's still fishing.
Yeah, but
no, we're not even joking.
I got
like,
trips.
Literally.
we timed it perfect this time because he called me. He goes, "Hey, weather looks bad." I was like, "Yeah, it is bad this time. I ain't fishing. I needed a break."
It almost took a act of God to get you in here.
Yeah. Hey, I'll come back. I promise.
No, honestly, we would love to have you come back in a whether it's later on in the year when you have another down period and such to just talk about some more stuff. And
we could probably get into the ice fishing a lot more too.
Oh man, there's a lot of detail. Next time we should, if we do, I'll bring some autos and stuff. Like, that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely do it. We'll do it. We'll get you when you have some downtime again. But thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like, subscribe to the channel. Any questions you have about any of this stuff we talked about, drop it in the comments below. We'll take a look and try to respond as best we can. And if you need any of the gear, a lot of the stuff that we talked about here, these cranks, the stick baits, the tube jigs, the spawn sacks, all the stuff you need to tie, we have it all here. And we'll also link to it in the videos. You can grab it right off of YouTube. If not, go to lakemichiganangler.com. And we will look, and we'll see you in the next episode next week. Thank you guys. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Thank you.